Hey guys, Tyler Ansman here with Tyler Ansman Performance. So today we're going to talk about the worst thing you can do this offseason if you want to get better at baseball. All right? So the offseason is not just a time to take a rest and never throw hard. We've talked about this before, but high velocity is an important piece to pitching performance, all right? As velocity increases, every meaningful hitting metric decreases pretty much linearly on almost every pitch, except for changeups doesn't seem to have as direct of a correlation. But in general, as you throw harder, you get better results, all other things being equal. So if we know that that's an important piece to pitching development, shouldn't we probably do that thing some this offseason? It can't just be rest, deloads, and towel drills. We actually have to touch maximum intent throwing, all right? This is for a couple reasons, all right? Performance is one, health is another, okay? And we're gonna dig into how we actually go about helping guys throw hard, and we'll dive into this more specifically in future videos. All right, so there are three kind of main buckets we wanna address when we're talking about developing throwing velocity, all right? So they're physical, technical, and then what we'll call transfer, and we'll dig into kind of what each of these mean. But I think it's important to note that from Isserin and other folks, we know that high velocity adaptations don't hang around super long, somewhere between 2 and 8 days. So we need to touch those things pretty frequently. And we've talked about this before, but there needs to be some deload period each year, right? Generally, we're looking at somewhere between 4 and 12 weeks for people who are in high school and beyond, where we're just not throwing at full intensity for that whole length of time. And generally, we're throwing with lower frequency and volume. But outside of that period, you're probably going to be throwing hard at least once a week, and that's an important thing to do, all right? So let's talk about the physical bucket first. So this is where we address things like kind of these force and velocity qualities, all right? So we know that pitching is kind of about moving through these extreme ranges of motion and transferring energy kind of through this system as we go, okay? So we know that kind of high force and high velocity qualities are both very important, and they kind of set the base along with our range of motion capabilities for how athletes are actually going to be able to move when they're on the mound. So we want to address these things kind of in the weight room, on the turf, these types of things. The second bucket is technical. So these are kind of the mechanical adjustments that we're making with our constraints and all of these other things, right? Mechanics are kind of an emergent thing that comes from the individual constraints that you have as an athlete. And so this could be limb length, this can be range of motion, this can be the force and velocity qualities that we mentioned. All of these things, and then how you've been coached along the way is also one of the constraints as well, but that would be more environmental certainly. And so, or maybe task constraints as well. And so what we're looking at as we kind of go through this is how do we adjust these pieces to kind of get towards a more optimal technical model given the qualities that we can change for this athlete, right? So we know there's acceptable bandwidths for movement for kind of each of the chunks that we'll be kind of putting together as we build our mechanical model out. And they're gonna look a little bit different for each guy, right? But that's why we have kind of these bandwidths. And so we wanna kind of move guys in the direction of being kind of more optimal as we go, but we're never gonna get towards this perfect model because it's gonna be a little bit different for each one based around kind of the qualities that we're talking about. The third piece is what we'll call transfer. And so this is how do we take this from the training situation into the game, right? Because throwing as hard as you can into a net 5 feet away and then even into a command trainer at full distance or a catcher at full distance, but not in a game setting is very different than getting out on the field with competition, with an umpire, in the elements, all of these things. It's a very different piece. And so transferring that to the game is an important thing because a lot of guys are going to feel like, okay, I can throw as hard as I can in a training session, but in game, I'm going to be at like 80% trying to hit my spots. Well, I think there is some, there's a little bit of nuance there because we want to raise the velocity ceiling so that your 90% or 95% effort throw is at a higher velocity than it was previously, right? So if we move your max velocity from 80 to 85 miles an hour, your 90% effort fastball also goes up as well. And that's something we want to see. But we need to be able to transfer pretty close to 100% effort pitches into game situations. So how do we do that? We put you in scenarios like that. So kind of the first would be, lower stakes. So a command training session where we have a velocity floor. You can't go below this, and we have kind of these different regions that we're trying to hit, and we'll kind of track numbers for that. Then we may add a stand-in hitter who can't actually swing. Then we may go towards a live scenario, right? And then we may take it outside in a live scenario. So we can get more and more specific as we go through these things. But to transfer it is kind of like what the training environment actually looks like and how we kind of piece this together as we go. So that's a little bit about how we help guys throw harder and take that into the games. If you got questions, feel free to drop them below. If you are interested in kind of learning more about our training, feel free to reach out via email or comment below. Thanks for watching.